I bought him a car, then my husband said it was in his style, so I sold it and bought one for myself. The alarm clock jolted me awake at 4:30 a.m., a full hour before my usual wake-up time, but I didn't mind. For nearly a year, I'd been waking up early to squeeze in a few hours of freelance graphic design work before heading to my regular job. Today was different though. Today was the day I'd finally get to see the look on Nathan's face when I surprised him with the car he'd been dreaming about for years. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him. In the soft glow of my laptop screen, I checked my bank account one last time. The numbers confirmed what I already knew. After 12 months of saving every penny for my freelance work, I had enough, just enough. The memory of Nathan pointing at that sleek blue Audi A4 3 years ago was still vivid in my mind. One day, Ellie, he had said, when we make it big. He had looked at that car the way children look at Christmas displays, with pure longing. That was before he got the corporate job, before we married, before his family became a permanent fixture in our lives. I showered and dressed quickly, my stomach fluttering with excitement. The dealership would open at 9 a.m., and I'd arranged everything over the phone the day before. All I needed to do was sign the papers and pick up the keys. "Where are you going so early?" Nathan mumbled from the bed as I was putting on my earrings. "Just meeting a client for breakfast," I lied, feeling a twinge of guilt that quickly dissolved into anticipation. "Family emergency last night, and they need their logo redesigned by this afternoon." He nodded sleepily and rolled over. Nathan never asked much about my freelance work. Sometimes I wondered if he even took it seriously. His mother certainly didn't. She'd once referred to it as my little hobby at a family dinner, and Nathan had laughed along with her. But that little hobby had just paid for a brand new Audi A4, and soon everyone would know it. The dealership was exactly 22 minutes from our house. I had timed the drive multiple times over the past few weeks, planning this moment down to the minute. Nathan's family was coming over for lunch, his mother, Gloria, and his sister, Rebecca. They were always looking for reasons to criticize me, and I was about to give them something they couldn't possibly find fault with. Or so I thought. The transaction at the dealership went smoothly. I handed over the cashier's check, and the salesman handed me the keys with a broad smile. "Your husband's going to love this," he said. "I hope so," I replied, running my fingers over the cool metal of the key fob. "He's wanted one for years." "Well, not many wives would do something like this. He's a lucky man." I smiled at that. Nathan was a good husband in many ways. He worked hard, he was kind to me when his family wasn't around, and he had supported my decision to continue freelancing even after we got married. But there was always a hint of condescension in the way he talked about my work, as if it wasn't quite real. Today, I'd show him just how real it was. The drive home in the new car was exhilarating. The engine purred like a contented cat, and the leather seats still had that intoxicating new car smell. I imagined Nathan's face lighting up, his arms wrapping around me in gratitude. Maybe his family would finally see me as worthy of their precious son and brother. Maybe they'd realize I wasn't just the opinionated outsider who had somehow snagged their golden boy. I pulled into our driveway at exactly 11:30 a.m. Perfect timing. Nathan's mother's car was already parked on the street, which meant they had all arrived. Taking a deep breath, I tied a large red bow around the key and walked into the house. They were all in the living room: Nathan, Gloria, and Rebecca. The television was on, some sports game I had no interest in. None of them looked up when I entered. "Nathan," I said, my voice more timid than I'd intended, "I have something for you." He glanced at me, his expression more annoyed than curious. "What is it, Ellie? The game's on." I held out the key with the red bow. "Go look outside." Gloria's eyes narrowed. "What have you done now?" I ignored her, focusing on Nathan. "Please, just go look." With a sigh, he took the key and walked to the front door. I followed closely behind him, with Gloria and Rebecca trailing after us. When Nathan stepped onto the porch and saw the Audi in the driveway, he froze. "Surprise," I said, unable to contain my excitement any longer. "It's yours. The exact model you showed me 3 years ago. I saved up from my freelance work, every early morning, every late night. It's all paid for." I waited for the joy, the gratitude, the amazement. But what crossed Nathan's face wasn't any of those things. Instead, his features twisted into an expression of unmistakable annoyance. "This isn't my style," he muttered, loud enough for his mother and sister to hear. The words hit me like a slap. "What? I mean, an Audi. Really? I've been talking about getting a Range Rover for months now." He jangled the keys in his hand, looking at the car with disappointment. "This isn't what I want." I stared at him, bewildered. "But 3 years ago, you pointed to this exact car and said." "3 years ago?" he scoffed. "People change, Ellie. I've grown up since then." Behind us, Gloria and Rebecca exchanged knowing glances before breaking into laughter. "You should have let the man buy his own car," Gloria said, patting my shoulder with false sympathy. "Men are particular about these things," Rebecca added. "It's like buying them clothes without trying them on first. Rookie mistake." The humiliation burned in my chest, rising up to my face like a fever. I had spent months saving for this moment, envisioning the joy it would bring, and all I got was mockery. "I thought you'd be happy," I said quietly, my eyes fixed on Nathan. He shrugged, handing the keys back to me. "It's a nice gesture, I guess. But next time, maybe ask before you make these big decisions." The three of them turned and walked back into the house, leaving me standing alone on the porch, keys clutched in my hand. Through the open door, I could hear them still laughing, making jokes at my expense. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Finally, I took a deep breath, pasted a smile on my face, and went back inside. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me upset. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let them diminish this moment entirely. "Lunch is ready," I announced, as if nothing had happened. "I made your favorite, Nathan. Roast beef with those potatoes you like." They moved to the dining room, still chuckling among themselves, while I served the meal I had spent hours preparing. As I watched them eat, talking and laughing without including me, a small, hard knot began to form in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just disappointment, it was something darker, more resolute. For the first time since I'd met Nathan, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake, but I smiled through it all, playing the role of the perfect hostess, the dutiful wife. They had no idea that behind my smile, something had fundamentally changed. The car sitting in the driveway wasn't just a rejected gift anymore. It was the beginning of a realization. And as I served dessert to my ungrateful husband and his contemptuous family, I made a silent promise to myself. This would be the last time I'd ever try to please people who would never be pleased with me. I just didn't know yet how soon I'd be keeping that promise. The lunch ended with Gloria insisting on helping me clean up, which really meant following me into the kitchen to offer unsolicited advice. As I rinsed dishes, she leaned against the counter, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a considerate whisper. "Ellie dear, I know you meant well with that car, but that's a lot of money spent without consulting Nathan." I kept my eyes on the plate I was scrubbing. "It was my money, Gloria. From my freelance work." She laughed as if I'd told a particularly naive joke. "Oh, honey, when you're married, there's no such thing as your money and his money. It's family money. And big purchases should be family decisions." Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Nathan and Rebecca on the couch, heads bent together, glancing occasionally in my direction. I didn't need superhuman hearing to know they were talking about me. "I understand," I said, though I didn't. Not really. Nathan had bought a $3,000 gaming setup without consulting me just 3 months ago. Nobody had called a family meeting over that. "Good," Gloria patted my arm with damp fingers. "I just don't want Nathan to feel like like you're trying to overshadow him. Men need to feel like providers." I bit my tongue to keep from pointing out that Nathan hadn't provided the Audi currently sitting in our driveway. Instead, I nodded and continued washing dishes, letting her words wash over me like cold water. The whispers weren't new. From the moment Nathan had introduced me to his family 3 years ago, I'd been the subject of their hushed conversations. I was too ambitious for their liking, too opinionated for a woman who should be focused on building a family. Once I'd overheard Rebecca tell Nathan I wasn't proper wife material because I'd questioned their father's views on immigration at a family dinner. But these new whispers were different. Now they were trying to paint me as financially irresponsible, as if I was some gold digger spending Nathan's hard-earned money on frivolous purchases. "She's always been a bit much," I heard Rebecca say to Nathan as I brought coffee into the living room. They both straightened up, smiling too brightly as I set down the tray. Later that night, after they'd finally left, Nathan found me in our home office. I was responding to emails from clients, finalizing details for a branding project due next week. "My mom thinks we should have a budget," he announced, leaning against the doorframe. "For personal spending." I looked up from my laptop. "We already have a budget. We made it together when we moved in here." "Yeah, but she thinks we should have, like, allowances. For things that aren't bills or necessities." My fingers stilled on the keyboard. "Allowances?" "Just to keep track of spending," he said, as if this was the most reasonable suggestion in the world. "So we don't end up with surprise cars in the driveway." "That car was bought with money I earned," I said slowly, making sure each word was clear. "I haven't asked you for a dime since we got married. All our shared expenses are split exactly as we agreed." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, looking exasperated. "That's not the point, Ellie. It's about making decisions together. Like your gaming setup," I countered. "Did we decide on that together?" "That's different. That was less expensive? Is that the difference? Because I saved for that car. I worked extra hours for it." He sighed, giving me that look. The one that said I was being difficult, unreasonable. "Look, I don't want to fight about this. Maybe we can all have dinner next weekend and talk about it more. Mom's got some good ideas about financial planning." With that, he left the room, seemingly oblivious to the anger simmering just beneath my calm exterior. I turned back to my laptop, but the words on the screen blurred as tears threatened. I blinked them away, refusing to cry over this. The next morning, I woke early as usual and went straight to my makeshift office. I checked my bank accounts, the personal one Nathan didn't know about, where most of my freelance income went. The balance was healthy, even after the car purchase. I'd always kept a separate account, initially because I liked having my own money, but increasingly because I didn't trust that Nathan's family wouldn't someday convince him to manage my earnings for me. Outside, the Audi sat in the driveway, untouched since yesterday. A physical reminder of rejection. Gleaming in the early morning sun, I could sell it, of course. But the thought of crawling back to that dealership, admitting defeat, made my stomach turn. As I sipped my coffee, watching the sunrise paint our suburban street in gold, a text notification lit up my phone, a new client inquiry for a major project. Their budget was generous, more than enough to replace what I'd spent on the car. I smiled, despite myself. Maybe this was a sign. In the quiet house, with Nathan still sleeping upstairs, I felt a strange sense of clarity. His family had always seen me as an outsider. Now they were using this car as ammunition in their ongoing campaign to diminish me, to put me in my place. For the first time, I wondered exactly where that place was supposed to be, and if I wanted to be in it at all. 2 weeks after the car incident, I found myself once again seated at Gloria's dining table for the obligatory Sunday family dinner. The Audi remained in our driveway, untouched by Nathan. He'd been carpooling with a colleague instead, as if driving my gift would somehow diminish him. "Ellie, pass the potatoes, would you?" Gloria asked, her voice syrupy sweet. I complied, avoiding eye contact. All evening, there had been an undercurrent of tension, punctuated by knowing glances between mother, son, and sister. "So," Rebecca said, dabbing her mouth with a napkin, "have you two figured out that budget situation yet?" I felt Nathan stiffen beside me. We hadn't discussed it since that night in my office, and I'd hoped the topic had been dropped. Apparently not. "We're working on it," Nathan replied vaguely, reaching for his wine glass. "Good," Gloria nodded approvingly. "It's important to have financial discipline, especially with the economy these days. We don't want to end up like the Petersons, do we? Their daughter-in-law spent them into bankruptcy." The implication hung in the air like a bad smell. I concentrated on cutting my roast beef into precise, tiny squares. Nathan's father and I always maintained separate accounts with a joint one for household expenses. Gloria continued. That way, I knew exactly how much I could spend on luxuries. At the word luxuries, Rebecca snickered, and I knew with absolute certainty they'd been discussing me before we arrived. The car, my freelance work, my supposed financial irresponsibility, all of it had been dissected and mocked. "I manage my own money quite well," I said quietly, still focused on my plate. "I've never missed a bill payment, and I contribute equally to our household expenses. Of course you do, dear. Gloria patted my hand, condescendingly. But there's a difference between managing daily expenses and making wise, long-term decisions. Like buying cars without consulting your husband, Rebecca added with a smirk. I looked up, meeting her gaze directly. That car was a gift. From my personal savings, not from our joint account. Still, Gloria shook her head. When you're married, these decisions affect both of you. Right, Nathan. I turned to my husband, silently pleading with him to defend me, to acknowledge that I had the right to spend my own money as I saw fit. Instead, he took another sip of wine and shrugged. It was a big purchase, he said, not meeting my eyes. Maybe a heads up would have been nice. The betrayal stung, but before I could respond, Gloria delivered the final blow. Next time, buy yourself a makeover instead of a car for a man, she said, her laughter tackling like broken glass. At least that way, you'd both benefit. The table erupted in laughter. Nathan, Rebecca, even Gloria's husband Tom, who had been silent most of the evening. They all laughed as if she'd made the wittiest observation, while I sat there, feeling as if I'd been slapped. I looked at Nathan, waiting for him to say something, anything, to defend me. He met my gaze breezily, then looked away, sipping his drink as if he hadn't heard his mother's cutting remark. In that moment, something inside me shattered. Not my heart, that had been cracking slowly for months, maybe years. No, what broke was the illusion that things would improve, that one day Nathan would stand up for me, that his family would eventually accept me. I excused myself to use the bathroom, locked the door, and leaned against it, taking deep breaths, calm the rage building inside me. Through the thin wall, I could hear them still laughing, moving on to other topics as if they hadn't just humiliated me at my husband's silent approval. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a notification from the car selling app I'd installed earlier that week, more out of curiosity than intention. Someone was interested in the Audi, offering nearly the full amount I'd paid for it. Can I see it tonight? The message read. I stared at the screen, a plan forming in my mind. Not a hasty, emotional reaction, but something more deliberate, more satisfying. Yes? I typed back. 8 p.m., cash only. When I returned to the table, I wore a serene smile that confused Gloria mid-sentence. I played the dutiful daughter-in-law for the rest of the evening, all while mentally cataloging everything I would need to do once we got home. We drove back in silence, Nathan seemingly oblivious to the storm brewing beside him. As soon as we pulled into our driveway, I grabbed my purse and phone. I need to clear my head, I said, already walking toward the Audi. Don't wait up. Ellie, come on, Nathan called after me. Annoyed, don't be dramatic. It was just a joke. I didn't bother responding. The Audi's engine purred to life, and for the first time, I enjoyed the power of the car I'd purchased. The potential buyer was meeting me at a coffee shop 15 minutes away. By midnight, the car would be gone. But something else would take its place. Something just for me. The transaction went smoothly. By 9 p.m., I had a stack of cash in my purse and a signed bill of sale. The buyer, a young executive who couldn't believe his luck, drove away in the Audi with a grin that stretched from ear to ear. I called a rideshare to take me to my real destination, Luxury Motors, where I'd test-driven my dream car nearly a year ago. Back then, I told myself it was just for fun, just to see what it felt like. But I remembered everything about it, the butter-soft leather seats, the purr of the engine, the feeling of power when I pressed the accelerator. We close in 20 minutes, the salesman said when I walked in, recognition dawning on his face. Hey, you're the lady who test drove the silver Mercedes last year. I am? I confirmed. And I'm ready to buy it now. Cash deal. His eyebrows shot up. But to his credit, he didn't question me further. An hour later, after signing the paperwork and counting out the cash, plus some extra from my secret savings, I was driving home in my new Mercedes, sleek, silver, and unmistakably mine. It was almost midnight when I pulled into our driveway. The house was dark except for the living room light. I sat in the car for a moment, savoring the quiet and the scent of new leather. Part of me expected to feel guilty or anxious, but all I felt was a profound sense of rightness. The front door opened and Nathan's silhouette appeared. I stepped out of the car, keys dangling from my fingers. Ellie, his voice was a mixture of confusion and anger. Where's the Audi? Whose car is this? Mine, I said simply. I sold the Audi and bought this instead. He walked closer, his face illuminated by the streetlight. His jaw had dropped, and he was looking at the Mercedes as if it might bite him. You what? Without talking to me? After everything we just discussed about making decisions together? I laughed, the sound sharp in the quiet night. Oh, now you want to discuss things? Where was that attitude when your mother suggested I needed a makeover instead of buying you a car? Where was your concern for making decisions together then? Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen 1,000 times. That's different. She was just joking. No, she wasn't. And you know it. I walked past him toward the house. I'm going to bed. It's been a long day. We're not done talking about this, he called after me. But I didn't turn around. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing with text messages. All from Rebecca. How could you be so irresponsible? Mom is worried sick about Nathan's finances. What are you trying to prove? I deleted them without responding and got ready for work. Nathan had already left, probably to avoid confronting me before he had consulted with his family about how to handle his wayward wife. That evening, I arrived home to find not just Nathan's car in the driveway, but Gloria's and Rebecca's as well. The family intervention had begun. I parked my Mercedes prominently at the front of the driveway and walked in with my head high. They were seated in the living room, a united front of disapproval. Gloria in the armchair like a queen on her throne, Rebecca and Nathan on the couch. Ellie? Gloria began before I'd even closed the door. We need to talk about your recent behavior. Do we? I set my purse down calmly. This car situation has gotten out of hand, she continued. First buying without consulting Nathan, then selling that car and buying an even more expensive one. It's concerning. Very concerning, Rebecca echoed. It's like you don't care about Nathan's financial security at all. I looked at my husband, who was staring at the floor. Nathan, do you have something to say? He glanced up, his expression torn. Ellie, you have to admit, it looks bad. The Mercedes is way more than we agreed to spend on cars when we set up our budget. Then we agreed to spend on cars? I repeated. When did we agree on that? And since when is my money part of your budget planning? All married couples have to make financial decisions together, Gloria interjected. That's what being in a partnership means. Partnership, I said, tasting the word. Is that what you call it when one person is constantly criticized, belittled, and overruled by their partner's family? Now you're being dramatic, Rebecca said with an eye roll. Nobody's belittling you. Aren't you? I walked to the kitchen and returned with a glass of water, using the moment to compose myself. Let me ask you something. If Nathan had bought himself that car with his own money, would we be having this intervention? The silence that followed was all the answer I needed. That's what I thought, I said. So this isn't about financial responsibility at all. It's about control. Gloria stood up, her face flushing. Young lady, I will not be spoken to like that in my son's home. Our home, I corrected. And I'm not done yet. I reached for my bag and pulled out a folder. Before you lecture me any further about money management and respect, you might want to look at this. I slid the folder across the coffee table. Inside were bank statements, invoices, and deposit receipts, a complete record of my freelance income for the past 18 months. Every cent of that Mercedes came from this account, I said, as Nathan reluctantly picked up the folder. My personal account, which I've maintained since before we were married. I've never missed contributing to our joint expenses. In fact, I've often paid more than my share when your bonuses didn't materialize. Nathan flipped through the documents, his expression shifting from defensive to confused. Gloria peered over his shoulder, her lips pressed into a thin line. This doesn't change the principle of the matter, Gloria insisted, though her voice had lost some of its righteousness. Marriage is about making decisions together. Like the decision to humiliate me at dinner. I asked quietly, was that something we all agreed on together? An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Rebecca shifted in her seat, avoiding my gaze. Nathan continued staring at the financial records, perhaps seeing for the first time just how much I'd been earning. I think Ellie and I need to discuss this privately, Nathan finally said, closing the folder. Gloria opened her mouth to protest, but Nathan cut her off. Mom, please, this is between me and my wife. It was the first time I'd heard him stand up to her, even mildly, and for a moment I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this confrontation was exactly what we needed to reset the boundaries in our marriage. After some reluctant goodbyes and pointed looks, Gloria and Rebecca finally left. Nathan and I stood in the entryway, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. "Why didn't you tell me you were making this much?" he asked, holding up the folder. "Would it have mattered?" I countered. "Would you have defended me to your family if you don't?" He didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. "I need some air," I said, grabbing my keys. "We can talk about this tomorrow." Nathan didn't try to stop me as I walked out to my new car. I drove aimlessly for a while, eventually stopping at a late-night cafe where I often worked when I needed a change of scenery. The barista recognized me and brought over my usual order without my having to ask. I opened my laptop, seeking comfort in work. There was a new email from Visionary Designs, a client I'd done a small project for 3 months earlier. The subject line read, "Long-term contract opportunity." My heartbeat quickened as I opened it. Visionary was an up-and-coming tech company known for innovative product design. The email was from Marcus Chen, the founder and CEO. "Your work on our rebrand exceeded all expectations," he wrote. "We'd like to offer you a long-term contract position as our lead graphic designer, with the potential for a small equity stake in our upcoming funding round." The offered salary was more than double what I typically made in a year from all my freelance clients combined. The equity stake, even if small, could be worth significantly more if the company continued its growth trajectory. It was the kind of opportunity I'd always dreamed of, but never thought would come my way. My hands trembled slightly as I reread the email, already imagining the possibilities. As I was contemplating my response, a notification popped up on my phone, a text from Rebecca to Nathan that had accidentally been sent to our family group chat instead. "Did you talk to her yet? Mom says we need to shut down this rebellion ASAP. I've got Crutchins at the design agency downtown who can file some complaints about her work. That should dry up her client list." I stared at the message, a cold fury building inside me. So this was their plan to sabotage my career because I dared to assert my independence. Before I could react, Rebecca sent another message. "Oops, wrong chat. Ignore that, everyone." Too late. I took a screenshot, my mind racing. They weren't just trying to control me within the family. They were actively plotting to destroy my professional reputation. The reputation I'd built through years of early mornings, late nights, and relentless dedication to my craft. Nathan's response came through a moment later. "Let's discuss this tomorrow. I need time to think." Not a refusal. Not outrage at the suggestion. Just a delay. I closed my eyes, letting the reality sink in. This wasn't a family with boundary issues. This was something far more toxic. When I opened my eyes again, I looked at the email from Visionary Designs with new clarity. It wasn't just an opportunity anymore. It was an escape hatch, a chance to build something for myself far away from the suffocating influence of Nathan's family. I hit reply and typed, "I'd be delighted to discuss this opportunity further. Are you available for a meeting tomorrow?" Marcus's response came within minutes. "Perfect. How's 10 a.m. at our downtown office?" I confirmed the meeting, a plan forming in my mind. I would go home, act as if nothing had changed, and say nothing about the job offer or the text message I'd seen. For once, I would be the one operating in secret. This time, I wouldn't be the only one surprised by what came next. 2 weeks flew by in a blur of secret meetings and careful planning. I signed a contract with Visionary Designs, negotiating a signing bonus that would provide enough cushion for what I needed to do next. Marcus was thrilled to have me on board, even more so when I showed him my portfolio of projects I'd kept private, designs too bold for my usual conservative clients. "This is exactly the fresh perspective we need," he'd said, eyes lighting up at my concepts. "When can you start?" "About that," I replied. "I may need a flexible arrangement for the first month. I'm relocating." He didn't ask questions, just nodded. "We can work with that." At home, I maintained a facade of normalcy. Nathan and I had reached an uneasy truce after the confrontation. He hadn't mentioned Rebecca's text about sabotaging my career, and I hadn't brought it up. Instead, I'd watched and waited, noting how often he took calls in another room, how frequently he visited his mother's house for quick chats. On the day everything changed, Nathan announced another family dinner at Gloria's. "They want to clear the air," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Start fresh." Of course, I agreed, surprising him with my enthusiasm. That sounds perfect. What Nathan didn't know is that while he'd been at work that day, I'd been signing the lease on a modern downtown apartment, just 3 blocks from Visionary's offices. And while he'd been on the phone with his mother planning this dinner, I'd been meeting with a lawyer who specialized in marital settlements. Gloria's dining room looked the same as always. The carefully arranged flowers, the expensive china, the air of suppressed judgment. But something was different tonight. They were all too polite, too careful. Rebecca's smile seemed plastered on. Gloria's questions about my week sounded almost sincere. I played along, complimenting the food, asking Tom about his golf game, pretending I didn't notice the occasional glances they exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. After dessert, Gloria cleared her throat. Ellie, dear, we wanted to talk to you about something important. Here it comes, I thought, setting down my coffee cup. We've been concerned about some of your choices lately, she continued. The car situation, your attitude, the way you've been treating Nathan. How have I been treating Nathan? I asked innocently. Like his opinion doesn't matter, Rebecca jumped in. Like you can make huge decisions without consulting him. We're worried, Gloria added, reaching for my hand across the table. I let her take it, her fingers cold against my skin. This isn't healthy for your marriage. Nathan shifted in his seat but said nothing, staring at his plate. I see, I said calmly. And what would you suggest? We think you need help, Gloria said, her voice dripping with false concern. Professional help, perhaps, and in the meantime, Nathan could take over managing the finances, just to ease your burden. All of the finances? I asked, including my freelance earnings? Well, yes, Gloria nodded. Just until things stabilize. I gently pulled my hand from hers and smiled. That's an interesting suggestion, but I have a different idea. I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick envelope. These are copies of all the documentation showing my financial independence. There's also a copy of Rebecca's text message planning to sabotage my career, which I've already forwarded to my attorney. Their faces froze in various expressions of shock. Nathan turned pale. Ellie, what are you? He started. I'm not finished, I said, my voice steady. I've accepted a position with Visionary Designs as their lead graphic designer, along with a small stake in the company. I've also signed a lease on an apartment downtown. The silence was deafening. Gloria's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. You can't just leave, Nathan finally said, his voice cracking. We're married. We can work this out. Can we? I asked. You were willing to let your family destroy my career because I bought myself a car with my own money. That's not something I can work out. But everything we've built, he protested. I've built plenty on my own, I replied. And I'll continue to do so. I stood up, smoothing my dress. My lawyer will contact you about the settlement terms. I've been more than fair, considering the circumstances. You ungrateful, Gloria began, her facade finally cracking. I've been nothing but grateful for the lessons your family has taught me, I interrupted. You show me exactly what I don't want in my life. I walked to the door, feeling lighter with each step. Nathan rushed after me, grabbing my arm. Please, he begged, suddenly desperate. I love you. I'll stand up to them, I promise. I gently removed his hand. It's too late for that, and we both know you don't mean it. Outside, my Mercedes waited in the driveway, already packed with the essentials I'd need until the movers delivered the rest to my new place tomorrow. Ellie, Nathan called after me, his family now gathered behind him, their smug faces turned pale with shock. I smiled, not out of malice, but from a genuine sense of freedom. I got into my car, engine purring to life at the turn of the key. As I drove away from the house, from the life they tried to trap me in, I caught a glimpse of them in my rearview mirror, a tableau of stunned faces growing smaller by the second. They would never understand what they'd lost. But I understood perfectly what I'd gained, myself, wholly and completely, for the first time in years.